Hi, and welcome to Studio SN. My name is Sara Naumann, and today I'm really excited to be a guest blogger over at Balzer Designs. Today we're going to take one of my favorite Balzer Designs stencils and combine it with a heat embossing technique to create unique card focals. Thank you so much to Julie for inviting me to be a part of the blog today. I hope you all enjoy the video. The focal of my card is this gorgeous pattern leaf design, and this is a stencil shape that has been heat embossed onto a heat embossed background. And this is one of my favorite ways to use stencils since it creates a really nice texture and shine. And I think if I wiggle this a little bit, you can see that fabulous shine on there. It's also a really great way to get double duty from your stencils and from your embossing powders. And of course, it's really easy to do as well. So let's take a look. Now the first thing I want to do is create the background, this embossed background on which to put my stencil. So I'm going to start with a piece of plain white matte cardstock, and this is just a standard weight. And I'm going to put it onto a piece of scrap paper, and the scrap paper has been folded in half so that I can use it to funnel my embossing powder back into the jar. So what I'm going to do, step one, is emboss the entire piece of cardstock. So a couple things that I'll need. Of course, embossing powder, and I'm working with Wow embossing powders. This is the opaque primary sunny yellow, really nice bright sunshiny yellow. I also need an embossing ink, of course, and I'm using Versamark. You can use whatever you happen to have on hand. And then to apply the ink onto my cardstock, I'm going to use a little mini rubber brayer, and this happens to be from Ranger. So you can use whatever variations on these products that you have. So first thing, I'm going to cover the entire piece of cardstock with yellow embossing powder. Now when I take off the lid for my ink, please don't be shocked. It is well used, as you can see. It's not going to impact the embossing ink at all though, but it does look a little bit shabby, doesn't it? And I'm going to go ahead and ink up my brayer completely on the embossing ink pad. And you'll notice I'm really getting the ink all over the brayer. I'm not just doing one or two little go-rounds. Really make sure that gets nice and inky, and then brayer it onto my cardstock. And I'm going to go two ways. I'm going to go vertically, I'm going to go horizontally. Really want to make sure that this is well covered with embossing ink so that I've got complete coverage on there. Cover up my grubby ink pad, and then I'm going to move this inside my scrap paper and take my embossing powder and sprinkle this all over the entire piece. You can see I like that yellow. I'm running low on it. So I'm just going to make sure that this is completely covered. And then what I can do is use the scrap paper to funnel this back into my jar of embossing powder. So I've got complete coverage on here. Then I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. And when I do, I'm going to have a piece that looks like this. So through the magic of television, I've got one that's already heat set. Now a couple of tricks when you're setting the embossing powder on here, because it is a large surface, you do want to give yourself a little bit of extra time because it will take some time for all of that embossing powder to melt on there. And I usually stop the embossing gun and kind of twist it a little bit like this just to see if there are any areas that still need to be embossed. And then after you've got it all completely heat set, do let it sit aside and cool for a minute or two before you handle it. So just a couple of tricks with that. Okay, so now I have this piece all set to go. If there are any little patches that aren't perfectly embossed, that's okay too, because we're going to cover them up with our next step. So again, another piece of scrap paper on here. Once again, my Versamark and my brayer, and this time I'm going to use a different color of embossing powder, and this is Primary Sunset Orange Regular. Okay, so nice bright orange. Now the first time I did the embossing, I made sure to emboss this completely. This time I'm just going to ink up my brayer and go really lightly, like so. So not complete coverage at all. And then again, put this inside my scrap paper and take that orange, and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle this on here. I'm not trying to get all over coverage. I really just want to get a little bit of background on here. And if there's not enough, I can heat set this and come back and do some more. So this is about all I want of that orange. And then again, I can go ahead and heat set this and funnel back my orange back into the jar. And then I will have a piece, once it's heat set, that looks like this. So again, I've heat set this. You don't need to give yourself as much time as you did with the yellow portion of it, but you do want to, of course, make sure it's completely melted in there before you start on the next step, which is finally getting to the stenciling part. So again, I'm going to bring in some more scrap paper, and now I can get out my stencil. And the stencil that I'm using, let me show this to you. This is the Pattern Leaves design, and I love this one because it can be single images. It's got 3 leaves on here, or it can be an all-over design. It can be a background, or it can be a focal piece. It's also really nice, of course, for autumn cards and other crafts, but it is also really great if you swap out the colors and do some light greens and yellows. You can have it be a really pretty spring card as well. So what I'm going to do is pop this down onto my background, and I want the one big bold leaf. Now this technique works with any of the leaves on here, but I wanted this really big bold one. So I'm going to get out some Post-it notes and just mask off the other leaf design on here, because the next technique is going to get a little bit messier. Okay, so I'm going to pop that down. And then the other thing I'm going to do is use some washi tape, and you could use washi tape, you could use masking tape, you could use stencil tape, whatever you have, to tape down the stencil onto this embossed background. Because the embossing ink is a little bit sticky, and we're going to do some direct to paper inking, you really want to make sure that that is down securely, because otherwise it can tend to lift the stencil back up with it. Okay, so I'm just going to tape this down here with some extra washi tape I had, and then again bring back in my Versamark, and then this time I want to emboss with red, and this is Primary Apple Red in Superfine. Okay, so I've got that on hand. Now we used the brayer before. This time I'm just going to squash the ink directly down onto my cardstock piece, and you can probably tell that the stickiness of the ink pad is lifting the stencil a bit, which is why I really want to make sure that I have that all taped down. Okay, and then I can lift this part off and again put this inside my scrap paper and then sprinkle it liberally with the red. Okay, and then tap it off. And I have a beautiful stenciled design. Then I just need to go ahead and heat set this. Same process as before. And then I will have a beautifully stenciled, voila, card focal. Now I've got yellow, I've got orange, I've got red. Why not go for one more color? Why not? So I'm going to come back and add a little bit of copper sparkle embossing glitter. And this is just to give some highlight areas around here on this leaf. So we've done brayering, we've done direct to paper inking. This time we're going to use the same Versamark, and we're going to use our finger as the applicator. So once again, another piece of scrap cardstock on here, scrap paper. And I'm just going to take my finger and tap it into the ink and then tap it onto my leaf. And I can also do some kind of scribbly marks over here. And then, oops, let me get this into my scrap piece. And then go ahead and sprinkle this on here and tap off. And then you can kind of play with some of this excess bit on here. You can add more dots if you want to. It gives a really fun, very pretty sort of shadow effect. And then you can go ahead and heat set this as well. And then the last part that I did is I actually edged each of the 4 sides of my piece of embossed cardstock, and then went around and tapped on some more of that red so that I was able to get a really cool edge going around all 4 sides. So then you can go ahead and heat set all of that, and then you will have, let me bring back in my original card, then you will have a piece that looks like this, ready set for your card focal, or you could, of course, use it for an art journal or a tag, all kinds of different paper crafts. And so what I've done here, you can see the red edging around the outside. I went ahead and matted this onto craft cardstock as well as black. And then I also have some teal on here. And I think you can just barely see that there's some script stamping going on here on that teal. And that's a very subtle touch, and that's actually one of the big stamps from the Eclectica series. So this is from ESN 10, this nice big script stamp on there. And I just stamped that directly onto a piece of teal cardstock, again, using my Versamark so it gets kind of a tone-on-tone effect. And then matted it up onto red and then onto a black card front. So this is how you can create layers of texture and shine using your stencils and your embossing powders. A big thank you to Julie for having me on this week. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you so much for all of your fabulous stencil designs. You keep me addicted and inspired all at the same time. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. For more ideas and inspiration, please do feel free to stop by my website at saranaumann.com. And if you enjoyed today's video, I invite you to subscribe to Studio SN on YouTube, and I'll keep you updated with a new video every Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining me on Studio SN, and I will see you again next time.